Hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Day 2 from the SEC spring meetings at Sandestin at the Hilton, where I just finished up talking with Dan Mullen, saw Nick Saban in the lobby, exchanged pleasantries with him, and Kirby Smart as well. A lot of these coaches now starting to filter out. Presidents and ADs, however, still meeting, and it appears that this alcohol sales in stadium issue is going to go to a vote, and that's going to be the thing to keep an eye on right here to find out if SEC stadiums are going to allow alcohol to be sold in the common areas. Obviously, right now, they're already sold in the premium areas. So today, day 2 from SEC spring meetings. This is your Ingles on the Beat segment. Certainly appreciate Ingles' support. And down here in Destin, talking with different coaches and ADs, had a good conversation with Dan Mullen. You know, I talked to Mullen about the attendance number that he put out. A lot of Georgia fans looked at that and said, boy, that number struck us as a little too coincidental. Mullen says, no, not really. Says when you're in a rivalry, people are always going to look for things. He said if he was going to do a number like that, it probably would have been more aimed at Florida State. So interesting how Dan Mullen talked about this Georgia-Florida rivalry, similarities to the Mississippi State-Ole Miss rivalry, and how people look deep into things. And so that was interesting to talk with him. Scott Strickland talked with the Florida athletic director. Obviously, I've had some comments about the College Football Playoff Committee and how when it went to a vote, I thought Georgia was at a disadvantage with the Florida AD, the Georgia Tech AD, and the Oklahoma AD in that room. I felt like that was a conflict of interest. It had nothing to do with how I feel about those guys individually, and I told Strickland that. I've known Scott Strickland since 1993 when I was covering Auburn, and he was the SID. I said, I just think you're in a bad position. And Scott said, you know, really, it's a lot more simple to pick those teams than you think. It doesn't even come down to preference. You know, and he made note of the Ohio State AD was on there, and their team didn't get in. So I'm going to have a story about some of the comments that Dan Mullen made. I've got video with Scott Strickland. That's something you're going to want to look for on Dog Nation. We already have a story up, excuse me, with Kirby Smart on his scheduling model, his aggressive scheduling model. And Kirby knows there's naysayers out there, well aware of that, and Kirby understands that, but he wanted to address why he's not concerned with it. If you read that story on Dog Nation right now, you'll find out where Kirby Smart is coming from and why he's not worried about this aggressive scheduling model. I think that's something a lot of Georgia fans are going to take some comfort in. So interesting to talk with them. Talk with Coach Ed Orgeron as well today. I've got a little video clip I'm going to put on of Coach Orgeron talking about that Georgia football game. You know, Orgeron held court for a good 20, 25 minutes. I mean, clearly a man at ease, likes where his program is at. Talked about maybe LSU being maybe closer than they were on the scoreboard to Alabama. I know I've talked to enough people and certainly taken a close look at it. If there's a team in the West that could dethrone Alabama and play in the SEC championship game against Georgia next season, it would probably be LSU. And we saw what happened last year in the LSU game against Georgia. Certainly that was something Strickland mentioned. That was something that stuck in the minds of a lot of people in that committee. That was something that really hurt Georgia's resume. There have been 2 lost teams before. Strickland made note of that back in the BCS days. But getting back to LSU, you know, Orgeron just talked about what a special day that was, the vibe that was in the air, and how well his team played. I thought that was interesting. And you know, that Georgia was the number 2 team in the country, and they were going into that game. And a game that Georgia was able to recover from, really got back into championship form after the bye week. I thought that was a game that Georgia used to fix a lot of things that were wrong. And to this day, I think Georgia took things from that game that I believe is going to propel Georgia to the SEC championship. And so that's something I've been asked about a lot down here. How does Georgia look? What do I think? Sharing it with you here on our Ingles on the Beat segment. You wonder the things that are being talked about. That's one of them. You know, the transfer portal story coming down here, I thought that was going to be a big deal. You know, the whole free agency element of it. But really, coaches are kind of saying, you know, it is what it is. And they're all kind of taking the approach. And Kirby said this on day 1, and Saban said it as well. You control what you can control. And you control wanting to make it where players don't want to leave. You know, what can you do for the players that they don't want to be in that portal? What can you do for them developmental-wise to lead them down the path to believe that, hey, even though I didn't start or get what I wanted this first season, there's still a path for development and a pathway on the field. And so that's been their approach to it. It's not to fight the rule. It's not to denounce the rule. We do know there's a lot of people in it, There's been a lot of people in it. Certainly affected Georgia, losing Luke Ford, a tight end that would have played this year, five-star freshman, transferred back to Illinois, and losing Justin Fields. And now all of a sudden with the Dwan Mathis situation, Georgia's back down to 2 scholarship quarterbacks. So that's another thing to kind of keep an eye on. It obviously hurt Georgia a little bit more than it's helped. We haven't seen Demetrius Robertson get on the field at receiver. Of course, he transferred in last year from Cal, got immediate eligibility. This is the year I think Robertson's going to contribute. Georgia has benefited from the grad transfers. Eli Wolf rolling in, Lawrence Cager rolling in this year. I think both have the potential to be big impact players. Other things from the spring meetings, ran into Greg McGarity this morning. He had just gone through a pretty tough workout. Man stays in good shape. McGarity said on the alcohol issue, hey, that's going to be in the president's hands right now. Right now, McGarity did not want to comment on that at this time. He's kind of a company guy. As you've seen, he supports Kirby Smart with all scheduling initiatives, and he's going to support his university president without trying to get his opinion in there. Different ADs, different coaches, they kind of take different active roles in terms of how involved they want to get. And I think it's based on the coaches. When you've got a leader like a Kirby Smart, an ideas guy, a man with a vision like Kirby has, who's got that Georgia blood running through him. I don't think anybody doubts that Kirby's going to do what's absolutely best for Georgia, what he believes. I think that enables McGarity to step back and play more of a supportive role, a liaison role between Kirby and the decision makers, whether it's in the SEC with scheduling and in games he wants to move up or back, or whether it's the Jacksonville series and where that's at right now, currently supposed to go through 2021. Both Mullen and Kirby have made comments that would lead you to believe that that's on the table. It's up for debate. It's up for discussion, I should say, on whether or not that series continues. But I think McGarity steps back and supports Kirby, supports his league president when it comes to this vote. So he's not necessarily the fly on the wall, but he's active in the discussions, but more so in a supportive role of his head coach and of his university president. So those are some things to watch for in the next 24, 48 hours. Certainly at Dog Nation will write everything we know when we know it, and you'll be able to check that at dognation.com. Certainly you can follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. Another blazing day out here on the Gulf Coast. I've been inside most of the day, so this is my first shot at some sunshine, and it's pretty nice. I don't know how Feinbaum does it. His set is, you can't see it, but his set's about 30 feet to my right. And it's funny, I did an appearance yesterday. I wore a sport coat and a tie, and some people on Twitter were saying, what kind of nut job wears a suit and tie to the beach? Well, I can assure you that if it was going to be any more than the 15-minute segment that I did on the SEC Network, I certainly wouldn't have been dressed that way. And you can see I'm in my regular apparel today with a nice short-sleeve golf shirt on, representing Dog Nation, and asking a lot of questions up there of these athletic directors, of these coaches that I run across as I run across them. And the Ed Orgeron discussion was interesting, and certainly Scott Strickland and the Dan Mullen comments. And can't wait to write that and get that posted on Dog Nation so you can see what was said and the tone of it and how it was said. It's interesting when you have an opportunity to talk to these coaches and athletic directors face to face. You get a much better read than maybe when you just hear something they said, or you read it. You don't really hear the context or the tone. Can't really look them in the eye. And so these face-to-face meetings are invaluable. It's only a select group of media. There's not a lot of people down here. And you can get a lot of insight as to what issues and what stories are going to be developing at the SEC Media Days. Folks, that's not that far off. It's, I believe, middle of July. So we're only talking about a month and a half more till SEC Media Days. And Georgia will bring some players there, and we'll get a lot more insight into Kirby Smart's football team, a lot more insight into the league. But the word here, keep your ear to the ground, is that Alabama's going to be real good again. There's a big shocker, breaking news there, right? But LSU may have closed the gap more than people realize. Certainly Georgia is viewed as a kingpin in the East, and I'm going to get down there and talk with Greg McElroy here in a few minutes about some issues Greg may have seen in the G-Day game. He called that game for SEC Network, so I want to get with him on that. Maybe try and hit up Chris Doring, get his thoughts on some of the new receivers. Chris Doring was a receiver at Florida. He's very familiar with Georgia, and he might be able to provide some insight as to what it's like for new receivers working with quarterbacks and how quick they can meld. That's going to be a big story for Georgia. How quickly does Jake Fromm get familiar and comfortable with a new receiving staff after losing 4 of his top 5 receivers from a year ago? J.J. Hallman's back, but after that, I think Tyler Simmons is next up with 9 or 11 catches among the receivers. Charlie Warner didn't have many catches either. He'll be the most experienced tight end. And you plug Eli Wolf into that mix that transferred from Tennessee. and you wonder about, as I said, Demetrius Robertson, Lawrence Cager. These are some of the players that you're going to look for with Tyler Simmons and J.J. Holloman, and how quickly can Jake get on the same page from that chemistry standpoint, that ability to anticipate what they're going to do. That's going to be decided by the practice time that they do in their voluntary works out this summer. I asked Kirby about that the other day. When the coaches are on the field and conditioning, footballs can't be out there. So it's not like this NCAA mandated time that the staff has with the team. They're not football practices, okay? They're conditioning drills. It's an opportunity for the coaches to evaluate who's in good shape and who's doing what, but they can't coach them up in football. So that's kind of where we're at. It's a little bit quicker report. Hit it fast because I want to get inside. I want to write those stories on Dog Nation. Follow us there. Check out our Dog Nation forum. I've waited in there with some comments that go beyond the story, maybe a little bit more insight than what you glean in the story. You want to check out the Dog Nation forum in addition to our Dog Nation page. Certainly follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. So that's going to do it. Pretty quick report. I packed as much information in there as I could, as fast as I could. I want to make everybody aware of what's going on here. Not as many issues, front-end issues, as past SEC media days. But to me, the alcohol sales issue is the one that everyone is going to want to sit back and keep an eye out for to see if that passes. To me, that's a giant legislation that's in the works. All these other things seem a little bit earlier in the process and may not be up for a vote of immediacy, but that's one that you're going to want to follow. So I know my producer, Connor Riley, back there in the studio. I want to thank him for helping me set this up. And again, I certainly want to thank Ingalls and everyone that makes this podcast available. I'll do another one tomorrow. There will be more news. There will be more information. And we got you covered at Dog Nation, though. You're going to want to check it. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to write those stories right now on Dan Mullen and Scott Strickland. So that's going to do it for today's Ingalls on the Beat from the SEC meetings here in Sandestin.